Good afternoon and welcome to this latest edition of TLC's Webinar Wednesday series. My name is Jameson Reynolds. I'm the Director of Marketing Strategy for TLC, and thank you for joining us today. You're joining us as we start part 2 of kind of our mini series within our Webinar Wednesday series. This series is completely focused on voices from the pandemic. Last week we spoke about the rural environment, and today we're looking at the urban landscape that's we're all facing right now. I'm going to go ahead and pass this session off to Melissa Powell, who is our Customer Success Manager. Before I do that, I do want to let everybody know that if you do have questions as we go through this, please do not hesitate to ask those questions. You'll see that you have a chat panel, questions panel. Please go ahead and put those questions in. We will probably circle back towards the end of this session and answer them there. So I did want to give everybody a heads up that in case you did answer a question, we didn't get to it right away. Please don't think we forgot about you. We're going to come back. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to go ahead and pass to Melissa. Melissa, please take it away.
Thank you, Jameson. As Jameson said, I am TLC's Customer Success Manager. I'm also a librarian, and I wanted to take the opportunity to promote the voices of librarians, customers, and non-customers, because TLC is all about partnering with libraries. Today, we've invited two people who are very familiar with urban libraries and what they've been facing this year. They are the founders of Urban Librarians Unite, a national C3 not-for-profit focusing on providing training, advocacy, and support for frontline library staff working in large urban systems. They both received the 2020 Library Journal Librarians of the Year for their work with ULU and urban libraries. Lauren Comito is a spreadsheet-wielding, sword-swinging activist librarian in New York City. She is currently a neighborhood library supervisor at Brooklyn Public Library and the chairwoman of the board of Urban Librarians Unite. Christian Zabriskie is the executive director of the Onondaga County Public Libraries and the founder and executive director of Urban Librarians Unite. He has worked in urban public libraries for nearly 20 years. Has been a circ supervisor, children's librarian, YA librarian, reference librarian, cataloger, and administrator. I had to read all that because I didn't remember it all. He speaks, writes, and teaches in a variety of areas of librarianship, including graphic novels in libraries, library advocacy, grant writing, library service to at-risk communities, and library service to unaccompanied minors. He's a proud adoptive parent and a believer that libraries can be the titanium crowbar needed to move our communities forward. I love that, Christian. Welcome, Lauren and Christian.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
You bet. So I wanted to start out with one question. The first question would be, what one myth about urban libraries would you want to dispel for other librarians, vendors, everybody who's here? Lauren?
Sure. I think sometimes people think urban libraries are these big impersonal places where you don't really get to know people as personally as you would in like a smaller area, like a less populated area. And I think the sort of myth is that cities are really just a bunch of small towns like smacked up right next to each other. So like my branch is in one small town and the next branch over is in the other small town. And like I walk to work, so I run into kids from story time and people who are experiencing homelessness who hang out in my library like all the time, just walking to the coffee shop, because it is like I work in and live in a small town where everybody knows each other within this city of 9 million people. And it's sort of an interesting dynamic.
Wow, yeah, I had no idea. Christian?
Well, and mine is kind of riffing off of a little bit of what Lauren says, as is so much of my work, but also kind of a different stake. Like one of the things like stranger danger. That's the thing that I think a lot of people who don't work in urban libraries perhaps kind of see and maybe feel, and I think we embrace it a little bit, right? Like I started my career at Queens at the Jamaica Library, right? And a lot of people, if you tell them Jamaica Queens, are like, whoa, that's a rough neighborhood, man. And it is. I mean, in its own way, it is kind of a rough neighborhood-ish, right? But then I went to Baisley Park, which like people in Jamaica Queens say, oh my God, that's a bad neighborhood, right? So did I literally throw a crackhead out of the library once? Yes, I absolutely did. were there moments and days and weeks of ineffable beauty in this space? Were there moments where we were together? Were there moments where it was a shelter in the storm, where a guy told me that like I was helping him reintegrate into society and I'm just his librarian after he'd done a hard 15, right? I had, and off of what Lauren was saying is that we're all tiny towns. I was riding the bus out to Baisley Park one time. There was a gentleman there who was very clearly on a hard heroin knot. He was really, really high from pretty clearly heroin. And he looked up, looked straight at me and said, "Hey, Mr. Librarian, what time is it, man?" And I said, "Oh yeah, dude, it's about 10:32. I'm trying to get to work. I'm picking up an 11 a.m. shift." He said, "Cool, thanks, Librarian." And then he went back to whatever he was doing, right? All good. It was a nice little librarian community interaction moment, you know? I mean, I had one point where I was smoking and I was buying Lucy's and also telling the guys to go to small business seminars at the library.
That's kind of funny. I love it.
It's pretty accurate.
It's just a small community on a large scale, but it's still just a small community.
Wow.
Just a bunch of small towns on stacked like Legos.
I like that. I like that. Okay, so here we go to the real heart of the matter of the pandemic. We've all been facing just an incredible challenge. I mean, libraries are already challenged with funding and all kinds of other things, and then you throw the pandemic at it where basically librarians become frontline workers. And so I want to know from you, what do you think has been the biggest challenge for urban libraries, and how did libraries and librarians deal with that? We'll start with you, Christian.
I think probably the biggest thing for us is how to stay in it and stay safe, you know, and have safety be a major thing and make safety a major thing and make it a big important thing for us. And then work within, you know, all the challenges that we've ever had are there. They're just bigger, you know, they're just amplified. That's all this has done, is just amplified all the issues. So staffing is an issue, budgets are an issue. You know, my library, when I started, we had 183 positions on the books, 183, 186 on the books. They weren't all filled, so we had about 170 staff. And we're now down to 48 staff and me. And that's to run a central library at Syracuse, for Syracuse, the city of Syracuse. An 11 branch system, or 10 branches plus the central library system, and a system that provides system support like ILS and delivery for an additional 22 suburban libraries. So, you know, you guys are exhausted. Everybody's exhausted. Coronavirus has made it so everyone's exhausted, and we're really exhausted. And we've always been short-staffed, and now we're really, really short-staffed. And budgets have always been an issue, and now budgets are really an issue. And it just all is kind of compounded all of it. We've not been able to open our doors yet. We've gone through a lot of things on that. It's not our decision. We're a county agency. So the county has not felt that they could effectively open without concern of having to close again. We've currently gone to a shared model where I have our branches working in pods, so staff are shared. You know, and we're just doing the best that we can with what we've got.
Wow. Lauren.
It's just the constant uncertainty. Like, we don't know what's next ever. In my building, we're not in our building yet. We went back for 3.5 days in early September to start in our step 2, which is staff goes back to the building and starts doing collection maintenance and stuff inside the building. And what happened was what you would expect would happen in a 108-year-old building that had been left without the HVAC running all summer because our HVAC was broken and we were using temporary air conditioners, and that has a leaky foundation. And so we had some mold, and then we had to leave. We had to get evacuated from the building. 3.5 days in.
It wasn't even Corona, it was mold.
Not even Corona, it was the mold. Yeah. So we would be back in the building if it were not for the mold, and they're working on it, and hopefully, like, just because it's interesting, because like we all want to go back in. Like we're ready to go back at least to step 2 and start doing some of that work, but we don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen Friday, it could happen Monday, it could happen 3 weeks from now. Who knows? The uncertainty itself is just difficult. Like waiting for it, like having to wait for answers and wait to know, you know. And then if you are in a building, the uncertainty of like, is this the person who has it? Is this the person who's going to come in and refuse to wear a mask? Is my neighborhood going to go into an orange zone and we're going to have to step back? Like never knowing like what's going to happen next week is hard. Like that's the hardest thing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I mean,
Can I jump in?
I was just going to say, you're in an urban library in a not urban, you're a county library. And your did you have to furlough? Is that what happened to your staff? Or
Yes.
Okay.
So we furloughed all of our part-time staff, and then we also furloughed an additional group of full-time staff.
Wow.
And what Lauren's saying is true. I mean, it is the instability. It is the not knowing what's next, and it's the strange things that do pop up, you know. And I just want to. My staff would love to reopen because they know exactly how important it is that they're doing their work, you know. And we put things in place and this kind of stuff, and it's challenging, you know. But we're also seeing an uptick, and that's challenging too. I'll share one with you. One of the big fears that I had, and I think it's a fear that we all have, but I think it's exacerbated in urban settings. Our central library, I mean, you're right, we are a county library system, but we are the public library for the city of Syracuse. So we are also an urban public library in and of itself, like as a whole unit, right? And our central library, because of its location and its proximity to various shelters and some other things, we typically would see upwards of 40 to 60 homeless members of our community in our space every hour of every day. I mean, very, very, very much our principal population. And a huge concern that we have had throughout this is how do we serve them, particularly as we start heading into worse weathers. Central New York winters are brutal. And so how do we serve those populations without then creating a potential exposure on a large scale space, as this would be a central space for people to meet in?
Right. That's one thing that I think very different with urban and rural is the fact that you do have those who are experiencing homelessness and other challenges like that, I mean, last week we talked about the students, that was their only place to get internet, to do their homework and things like that. And then to compound it with the fact that you are, I know some people said like a de facto shelter, but it's more than that. You're a safe space.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't know. I mean, I have seen most of my regular patrons out in the street. There is one person I have not seen yet that I'm worried about and have been since March. I don't know where he is or how he is or if he is, and there's no way for me to find out. And that can be, like I said, small town. It's hard to just have someone kind of vanish like that, and you've talked to them about like shows at museums and stuff, but they're experiencing homelessness, and you just don't know where if they're gonna pop back up.
So
and we've been seeing a lot of our regulars congregating in group environments out in the public, but those spaces are going to be less accommodating soon.
Right.
Public spaces that aren't enclosed are going to be much less accommodating soon.
You've talked a lot about the people that you serve, and I'm just wondering, because it is obviously very stressful, and you're both leaders of your particular libraries. What are you doing for the staff? How are you helping the staff? Because you do have, are they you said that you weren't in your building, but are they doing things where they still feel like they're working at the library?
Yeah, I mean, we're working from home. We have a lot of professional development we've been doing, and now we're rotating through another branch that is open. So each week, 2 of us goes and rotates through on their 2 teams. complicated.
Yeah.
So every couple of weeks we'll like rotate through the building. I think one of the things that helped us a lot was that I had been using Zoom for Ulu for so long that like the first week we closed, I was like, staff meeting Friday, here's the link. Let's all just talk for a half an hour.
Cool. Cool.
And we just started doing that every week. We'd have a meeting and we'd just hang out and check in and make sure everyone was all right. It was never really work related. It was just hanging out. And now they're work related because now we're back to doing stuff. But I think that connection when we were all really isolated was super helpful.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And that's something I've actually witnessed. I mean, Lauren has been actively engaging with her staff throughout this entire thing, and she's been setting a lot of best practices throughout this by using technology as a means with the staff who are not necessarily technologically astute. I mean, saying, hey, like, oh, good for her, she's got like this Brooklyn hipster staff. That's actually not her staff. Her staff actually are not particularly technologically astute.
My staff is fantastic, and they have figured it out in a way that I am impressed and happy with.
Of course. So, well, there you see it, folks. I mean, that's what you see is what you get.
I mean, we're stuck using Teams, which is not my favorite because they like it so much, but it'll be all right.
So be it. I mean, I've got a slightly different thing going. I mean, for communications and stuff, I've done 4, possibly 5 town halls. I have stuff set up to have questions asked anonymously of those town halls, and that's a true anonymous ask. We actually set up a Google form so that people can ask things, with no fear of even having their name associated with them. Typically, they last about an hour. I think the longest one was an hour and a half, where people just were asking questions in chat, and it was just an open, what do you need to know from me? When possible, I make a point of driving to the branches and doing the branches. And I mean, I would suggest that the latest iteration of our staffing is a radically changed thing with a focus on staff. What we had been seeing is that we were down to about 4 staff per location prior to our last round of furloughs. And that was a lot. That was tight. We had lost all of our part-timers. We started doing library pickup in June, I think. We were very early in library pickup, and we actually set up something called the Librarian Special, which is a thing that we've been doing a lot. And it's very, very something that the public and my staff really enjoy. The public fills out just a quick little survey, and then my staff chooses essentially a blind bag for them and curates a collection for them. And that's something it's been, it's interesting because I actually, when I developed it, I mean, I kind of developed it as a way of supporting librarian morale as well, because then they can be doing the work of the librarian and making selections. So that's been very popular. Our latest iteration of scheduling, I would suggest, is very staff centric, because by shifting from a 4 to a 5 to 7 person in a staff model, that allows for a lot more flexibility. If you have 4 people and one person gets sick, then if another person has any conflict, a vacation, an issue with their kid, I mean, nowadays education is extremely challenging. I have 2 children in my house, and there's constant issues with school. And fortunately, my partner is able to be at home. My wife is able to be at home with them, but a lot of my staff don't have that luxury, and I'm very well aware of that. And so going to a 5 to 7 model makes it so that maybe 2 or even 3 people can be out on a given day, and you can still maintain the library without having to shut the doors of the library. My staff didn't really like it, and the public doesn't like it. Nobody really likes it. I think I'm the only person who likes it. I'm the only person who sees the genius of it. But at the end of the day, as Lauren will tell you, I'm happy to have everybody be equally inconvenienced. That to me is ideal.
Well, and to say that is that you're doing the best you can for both the staff and the public. It's not that we're doing the best we can, I think is what we have to say. It's not going to be pleasant no matter what we do, but that it's going to be appreciated by everybody involved is what I'm hearing. And that just sounds, I like that. So equally inconvenience. So my next question is, what is the next transformation you see coming directly related to what has challenged us during the pandemic? Lauren.
Okay. Doing stuff outside. So much outside. Figuring out, like, one of the things that I've been sort of thinking about is how, like, my building is really sort of like an eighth cantankerous staff member. And, you know, we've got the mold and we can't go in, but that doesn't mean that it can't be useful, right? So, like, it's grouchy, but we can still, people can get Wi-Fi outside. If we can get furniture for people to sit outside and use the Wi-Fi, that'll be helpful when we get to the point where we can open the garden gates. I've set up a poetry walk around the outside of the library where you start.
Which is really
and you just,
lovely. It's super lovely. I've seen photos. It's so lovely.
you start at the beginning and then you walk, and each stanza is on a piece of paper laminated about 6 feet apart because we have one of those like nice wrought iron fences. We had an outdoor haunted library where the staff was behind the fence and the kids walked around the outside, and then we shot the treats down a tube to keep everybody apart, but still be able to see people.
And how many kids,
which,
how many families and kids at that safe, really safe event did you have, Lauren?
500. I actually had a clicker because I was like, I need to know how many came through. We had 500 people walk through.
Wow.
And everybody got to see our children's librarian, and everybody got to see the staff, and it was, you know, a chance. And kids got to see their friends, and everybody wore masks, and people were good, and everyone was separate. I mean, except for me because I was directing traffic, but everybody else was separated.
Yeah.
And,
oh, that's great.
You know,
and Lauren had spacing on the sidewalk. I mean, all the details were there.
Yeah, I spray chalked ghosts on the sidewalk so that the people would know how far apart to stand. But it's not just like my library is not the only one doing that. Like Red Hook just got a bunch of furniture that they've put out in their sort of gated area where people can come in and use the Wi-Fi and sit down and be outside. So I think we're going to be doing stuff outside for a very long time. Where we have the space, and where we don't, we will figure out ways to make it. You know, because
well, we've always said we need to get out to the community. Out of the building and into the community.
And now you can't be in the building, so it has to happen.
So Christian, what do you see as something that's going to be directly related to?
I mean, kind of the manic thing that I have is safety. Safety is a constant, and if you're not factoring safety into everything, then you're not doing your job. And I'm a little bit crazy about that. I no longer believe in conventional wisdom. I really annoy my staff and my friends because I'll constantly say conventional wisdom isn't. You know, whatever was smart, you know, a year ago, it's not smart now. It doesn't work. Nothing. I mean, nothing. Maybe forging horseshoes, maybe, but for the most part, nothing. And my guess is that that's changed too, right? Riffing off of something that Lauren has done, but using a slightly different metaphor, something I've talked to my staff about a lot is that after being in branches, I mean, I've been in branches for about a decade. Lauren's been in branches for about the same amount of time, I think. And I think that over the years, we've really transformed our branches into these hyper efficient machines, right? And I use an analogy. My analogy is sailing, right? And we've created these branches that are the equivalent of a sailboat that can be sailed by a single person. They're called single-handers, right? And they're usually large. I mean, they're not small boats. I mean, a real true blue water single-hander is about 45 feet, right? 45 feet. And they're really designed to like just really withstand a lot of stuff and be designed so that one person can do it. All the controls come back to one spot. There's a lot of clip-ons. So if you're running up and down the deck, you're safe. You don't get washed overboard, you know? And I think that for a long time, we've developed these branches that are essentially single-handers, right? Where the branch is almost giving you an extra staff member, right? Like they can take care of a certain amount of our patron needs. They can check books out on their own. They can return books on their own. There's finding aids. There's browsing things. There's, you know, there's things that are set up. We have sight lines so that a single librarian can see an entire floor. You know what I mean? We've really done a lot with this. And now that's all out the window. And now one person has to be the ship's mistress is what it's called. And as the ship's mistress, you spend the whole time taking care of the ship. All you're doing is fixing the sails, making sure the leaks aren't getting too bad, all that stuff. Now, I don't use that particular term with my staff, but it's an effective term to use from sea shantiness, right? About the fact that nowadays you need to have one person being like, whoa, 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 guys, you need to separate out. Hey, hey, folks, let's get a little space here. What's our cleaning? What's our cleaning? So I think that that's going to be a major issue with staffing. It's going to be hard because for so long we've constricted library staffing, and we're going to need to have a tick up in order to be able to continue the services that we offer.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, we have been doing more with less has been the whole thing in libraries, and we can't anymore, not staff wise, not body wise. So
now we have to do less with more because everything that we're doing right now is incredibly labor intensive.
Yes, it is.
Everybody being on holds pickup constantly, like the amount of running around and picking books off the shelves is hard. And to do it when you're having to cut the staff in the building in half every day to have social distancing.
Yes.
It's just we're doing more with less.
And every one of those non-branded brown bags that goes out the door costs me 63 cents.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Well, that's the thing too. We work so hard to be good in recycling and all that. We can't do that anymore either. But so before I get to my last question, it's been really interesting having talked to rural librarians last week and you guys this week. There is a running theme, and that being their thing that was going to change was outside as well, looking at designing their spaces to have outside, to do everything outside. And then in a way, they said they were very fortunate because they're used to doing things with hardly any staff already. So, so it's just kind of interesting how there's kind of a theme running through that the same things are occurring to no matter what size library you are.
We've often felt that there's a deep connection between true urban and true rural librarianship, and that those, with the greatest respect for everybody in the field, we really feel like hardcore rural, I'm trying to get in the frame, hardcore rural and hardcore urban have a lot more in common with each other than they have with, frankly, anybody else or anybody else has with either of us.
So I think my observation so far, having talked to two, and then when I talk to schools next week, is that I have a feeling we're all going to be working together a little bit more as well in that respect.
I hope so.
I think okay, so the final question, this is an easy one. What is great about urban libraries? What would you promote about urban libraries that you just think is the best thing?
You've really got two come to the mountain people here. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you want? Like, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's amazing. You know what I mean? In the same location that I literally threw a crackhead out, like with deep intention of violence. I'm sorry, but like it happened that way, and my staff would never say it, but like it was going to go bad if it was going to go bad. That same place, I would have kids come in and like check in with me on their homework. I had people checking in to make sure that they were like, hey man, I'm not drinking. I had a guy come in who like was having a hard time staying outside, so we found him a church. We had a raccoon get blown into our atrium and we fed him for 2 weeks, or her. We don't care. There's no judgment, and it's none of my business. They had a library card. Kids could get money knocked off of their fines by reading to the raccoon. My deeply urban population treated my library like a zoo. I had people coming in with a cup of coffee, just watching the raccoon, right? So it is beautiful because humans are beautiful, and humans' interaction with libraries are beautiful. And so if you have a lot of that, you're going to come out with a lot of really beautiful stuff, kind of all the time.
I kind of love most how urban libraries are like this place where people meet who never would, never would, right? So I had an 8-year-old-ish boy and his tutor working through some really hard math problems. And then I had one of my guys who sleeps outside on the other side, and the kid's having a really hard time. And the guy goes, "You got this. You got this. Math can be hard, but like, you're going to figure it out. I figured it out. You're going to figure it out too." And like gives him this pep talk. And I just sort of turn around like, what is happening right now? I
Wow.
like it. Okay. But this was the same guy who every once in a while would be like, I'd ask him to do something and he'd be like, okay, mom. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
parents
love
like,
it.
did you eat today? Yes, mom. It,
So I like that. I mean, it's just the fact that it is more than, and none of it had to do with anything with books. It all had to do with the people,
yeah,
which
it's
is
always
really
about the
kind of
people.
cool. Hmm.
Yeah.
So just a real quick elevator speech about Urban Librarians Unite. Could you,
Oh,
who
this is
wants to give us
Christian.
that one?
Go for it.
Elevator speech, Christian.
Urban Librarians Unite is a group is a not-for-profit that's focused on urban librarianship and frontline librarianship in large urban centers. We are not Urban Libraries Council. That is a group of libraries, and they're great. They do amazing work, but we're just not them, okay? We're focused on the frontline staff. We have a really great conference that we do every year. That's really Lauren's job and her baby, and she does an amazing job of it. We've been able to do some great work with refugees. We have a website called Refugee Libraries, which is a clearinghouse for information for migrants, refugees, and unaccompanied minors. And we've been able to do a lot of very significant direct work with unaccompanied minors and children separated from their families at the border, migrants and refugee children. We recently did a book drive and got a grant with First Books, which we did in partnership with Reforma. We were able to provide about 30,000 books across 4 states. And we currently have another book drive going now in memory of my, actually in memory of my mom who just passed away, but we actually have a matching donor for that and that kind of stuff. So we're doing that drive right now. We're sassy. We're 2 kids in a overcoat trying to get into a R-rated movie. That's pretty much Lauren and I all the time. And that's what it is. But nobody gets paid. The interns get paid. We just got a big
Yes.
grant to look at trauma in librarianship. So this is something that we're really engaged in, and hopefully the community will embrace. And a lot more people are going to be seeing us because we did just get this large grant from the IMLS. It's in partnership with St. John's University and the New York Library Association. We're attempting to address some issues around trauma in public librarianship, specifically urban public librarianship. We're also bench testing some new study models and some new kind of creativity and idea development models that Lauren is pioneering. She's been able to pull out of the Brooklyn hacker community. We're trying to apply some of those to libraries and library science. So it is both a study itself, but it's also a bench test for some new study models that Lauren is producing.
Wow. Okay. You guys are very, you do a lot. And it's a good thing it was a very tall building. So the elevator had plenty of time.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I love the
There's
passion.
a
I
lot
do.
of tall buildings here.
So on that, Jameson, do we have any questions that came in? Oh, wait, we got a poll. That's right.
There is a poll on the screen that if everybody attending could take a moment and answer that poll. And before I get into the questions, I do appreciate the introduction of sea shantiness into the library lexicon that we have now. That was much appreciated. So we did get some questions, and like I had said earlier, we were going to probably address these as we went through, but I didn't want anybody to think we forgot them. At some point, somebody had asked this question, and it was pretty much addressed. How are the libraries engaging the community while the physical buildings are closed? How have outreach services changed since the pandemic? And now we did talk about that. And what I'm kind of curious about is how does that situation, like what you're doing right now, I'm thinking about the poetry walks, I'm thinking about the haunted library. How does that evolve as you go into the winter? Because I know it's cold in central New York. It's cold in Brooklyn too. So I'm kind of curious, like where you see your outreach going from there.
It's actually been delightfully warm in Brooklyn over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like so nice. Like it was cold on Halloween, but it's been beautiful outside. So I have the luck and good fortune of working and living in the same neighborhood. And so I've lived here for 20 years, and now I am lucky enough to work close enough to my home to walk. But that means that I kind of walked into my job knowing people. I'd been active on some of the community Facebook pages before I became the librarian, and now I just talk like I still am, but in a slightly different way because I'm the librarian. And so that's a lot of my outreach is through going on the local community parenting Facebook pages, the one where we all yell at each other about parking, you know, street parking is theft and all of that fun stuff. It's just a consistent, it's so fun to watch. Anyway, we have a lot of community Facebook pages, and then we have there's a local mutual aid group that we worked with to sort of help call food pantries and verify their information and feed that information back into the mutual aid group. Yeah, it's a lot of that. We emailed the local PTAs and parent coordinators at the schools when we had the Halloween thing, and so it's just this sort of constant electronic putting things out there.
Gotcha.
And I think that we're going to be doing some of that stuff as well. I mean, and we'll probably get back to some of the stuff that we did at the height of the shutdown, to be honest. You know, like I was doing story time every day. I don't know, maybe I'll start doing that again. We did a partnership. We established a partnership with Syracuse Shakespeare in the Park. They were able to continue through their spring program because they were doing it virtually. And they did an hour of Shakespeare for us every week. We threw them some money. We threw them like 500. I mean, I don't know how much it was. We threw them a little. I do know how much it was, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But we threw them a little money as a partner organization just to kind of help keep them afloat. And then they gave us an hour of Shakespeare every week, and they would do soliloquies, they would do monologues, they would do kind of abbreviated versions of plays. And that was a value added. One of the challenging things, and again, I'm very tied to staffing because that's my job now. You know what I mean? Like I don't really answer reference questions anymore. I sweat staffing. And one of the things for us is that one of the people who we had to furlough was our really, really gifted social media person. So now we're having to do more without this really gifted, super talented, dedicated staffer. And these are kind of the things that you push against. You know, there's a push-pull, and in the world of always more in librarianship, it's hard. You know, it's hard to take a breath.
Yeah, I think we've all had to sort of contract into like what's vital and what's important, and everything's vital and everything's important, but just sort of not having enough resources to do everything, you have to make like terrible choices.
Right. And I will say this next question that just came in perfectly ties into really both of your all's responses, but specifically to Lauren. How did you market the haunted library to get 500 people? Is that an unusual amount of turnout? Is that on par with pre-pandemic? Where does that number stack?
That was an insane turnout.
Okay.
And thank God we didn't have 500 people. There were not 500 people there at any given time. Because that would have been madness. Because people were walking around the perimeter of the building, we were able to have people go around the perimeter and cycle through and keep trick-or-treating down the street. I posted it on the Facebook post. I shared it with the mutual aid group. I posted it on all the local parents listservs. Our children's librarian emailed it to all the teachers. It got picked up by the local school settlement association and put in their guide to safe things to do this Halloween. I think it ended up getting tweeted by the library masthead account, and that's just sort of happened.
Gotcha.
I mean, I just want to say, and again, I'm just trying to amplify, it happened because of weeks worth of work. I mean, I saw this with Lauren. She built this stuff, she built the candy chute in her living room, in her kitchen. I mean, for weeks, I was hearing her in a friendly business partner, we support each other kind of a way, talking about this. So, success happens when you work at it. And that is an example of, this is an example of why Lauren succeeds.
Very cool. Candy shoot. I want to learn more about the candy shoot.
It was amazing.
It was a huge thing this year. Was all across Brooklyn, people putting cardboard tubes on their stoop railings and shooting candy down to the kids.
Our local hardware store chain, Abishan, actually had to come in and learn how to make your candy shoot. With PVC
there were some
pipes.
places that had like flexible tubes from the second floor to send it down.
That's good.
It's just awesome.
It's just channeling that staff creativity into what you said is vital. I mean,
and the Friends of the Library were a huge help. Like they bought the bubbles and slime that we gave out and came and ran the shoot and promoted it, and like we couldn't have done it without the friends. It was really great to be able to do a project with them while we're closed too.
Yeah.
And it was really great for the staff to all be able to see each other. We don't get to work in the same building on the same day, but because we were outside and separated, it was, you know, we could all actually be there at the same time, which isn't a thing we get anymore.
We heard, one more question. Someone said on the last rural library webinar that we had, libraries had limited space to quarantine items, which was making it incredibly difficult. Is that true for your all libraries as well?
Yes and no. We are on a tight 1 week quarantine. We are asking all of our member libraries to stay to it as well. Nothing goes in or out of the flow between our 30-something, 34 libraries, I think, without having gone through that quarantine. We've been using programming rooms, which fortunately we have. We have one location that does not have a programming room. If they don't have it, in the location where there's no programming room, yeah, space is hugely a problem. So, and when the time comes that we are allowed to begin to have programming again, presumably materials will not be in quarantine when we're allowed to do programming. If were it not for programming rooms and the fact that that's such an inimical part of urban librarianship at this point, that would be an issue. And it's been a major issue for us at our two storefront locations in these community development areas that we have. And it's a problem at our one location that does not have have a separate programming room.
We're not open yet, but when we do, yes, that's going to be a problem. Although by the time we are taking returns, most of the libraries in Brooklyn will always also be taking returns, and so it will be getting spread out across more branches. I think that in the very beginning, when we had 6 branches or 7 branches open, the returns, I've seen the photos, it was madness. But like as more branches have been able to accept returns, it's spreading out across the system and we have a little bit more space.
Yeah, in Onondaga, we had over 250,000 items in circulation when we reopened the doors or reopened to take back materials. Yeah.
It's my understanding that we still have 250,000 items out from before March.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised.
It was a half before we opened, but yeah,
that just feels incredibly overwhelming to me right now, and I'm not going to be there handling the return, so I don't know how.
Eat an elephant. How do you eat an elephant, man? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. One bite at a time.
I refuse to think about it until I have to think about it. When we're back in the building, we will think about it then.
And on this note, last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. What piece, and no pressure, but what piece of advice, what single piece of advice could you share with other libraries during the pandemic? Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of things that I'd like to share. Lauren, do you want to go first on this?
No,
or you want me to go
ahead.
first?
You give me time.
I mean, the main thing, so be flexible. If things need to change, just change. You know what I mean? And don't make a big deal out of it, and don't have a lot of ego associated with that. A lot of times people feel like if they have to say that they made a mistake or that they had something wrong, that they've done something wrong or that they did something bad, and they didn't. Things change constantly. So, I mean, I've written probably a dozen plans for the future and put, lots of hours of work and thought into them, and then just scrapped them because I didn't need them, because they didn't work out or they didn't do whatever. But, do planning for the future, do planning for the next thing. Try and be kind to each other, because it's really hard right now. It's hard on everybody. So try and be kind to each other. And as much as possible, and this is very hard, I think this is very hard in librarianship in particular for whatever reason, but it's hard across the board in America, I think. Assume that the other person is their intentions are good. Assume that they are working hard. Assume that they are competent. So when you come in and say, wow, dude, we'll just move the mop and move it over here. Well, they probably saw that, and they probably have a reason why they didn't move that mop, And so just kind of listen, talk less, smile more is what I've been thinking about a lot. And I just think that we can all kind of benefit from that if we just kind of listen to each other more and just have a space for listening, even if, you know, even if it's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be okay. Everybody just needs to be okay, you know?
Yeah, I think mine would be share as much information as you can in an as easy a way as you possibly can with your staff, so that they know what you know, right? So there shouldn't be, like, I try to make it so that there's not anything that I know about my branch that's 2 to 3 other people don't know. Because if we go back and I get sick and they don't know, how do we keep going? And how, like, I'd be up trying to work while not feeling well. And also, in a time when everything is so uncertain and you literally don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, at least knowing that no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow is kind of reassuring, I guess.
True.
I've
We
tried to
don't
tell
know.
my staff, you know, hey, look, I don't know the answer to this, but we're going to try and find it together.
Yeah.
I've tried to say that a lot.
Being willing to do that is so important. Just, I don't know, but
You
we'll
know,
figure it out.
Yeah.
and all of that information from administrators, you know, administrators try and tell your staff as much as you can. Staff who aren't administrators, like, if I can't tell you something, it's because I can't, you know? And I mean, Melissa and Lauren know me pretty well. Jameson, we just met, but like, if you ask around, I'm usually considered a pretty blunt person. And
No.
if I'm not telling you something that I know that's important to you, it's because I couldn't, you know. And I just think that that's kind of the kindness that I'm looking for too, that it can go in all directions. Directors, you got to be kind to your staff, and staff, you know, odds are that person is doing their best. They might cry at their desk. You don't know.
Wow.
Lauren.
And on that note.
Yeah, to say, Lauren and Christian, thank you very much for taking part in today's webinar. UrbanLibrariesUnite.org. We do have the link in our chat, so if you didn't already see that and bookmark that, go ahead and do that now. I will let everyone else know that our webinars are always archived and recorded, and if you ever want to go back and watch this again or share this with someone else, all you have to do is go to tlcdelivers.com/webinars, and you will find this and other webinars we've done. Again, this is part 2 of our Voices from the Pandemic series. The first one was rural, this one was urban. I do believe our next one is based on the schools environment, correct?
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
Talk about school libraries.
So please come back and check that out. Melissa, Lauren, Christian, again, thank you very much for this webinar. Everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy. Please continue to wash your hands, use your sanitizer, and please mask up now more than ever. So thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jameson. Thanks Melissa.
Thanks.